Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, August 26th, 2025, and our friend Colonel Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Good to be with you, Nima, even if it is a miserable day in terms of news.
Yeah, exactly. Larry, let's start with one of the most, I don't know how to call it. It's unbelievable when you look at what has happened at the hospital in Gaza and the way that Israelis attack, and everybody's coming out and talking about it. What is your understanding what has happened? It was by accident. It was how do you get it? Because Netanyahu comes out and says something that we didn't want and we didn't intend to do this, and you see that as you mentioned, they're calling it double tapping. What's your understanding of that?
Well, he's been doing this sort of thing all along, of course. Since October the 7th, he's been doing this sort of thing with increasing frequency. And the actions around these sites of supposedly global humanitarian assistance are absurd, and they're indicative of this. I think this one caught him off guard. I can imagine the rear ends he's pasting right now in the Israeli Defense Force, particularly the people in charge specifically of this operation. But he's not getting them for having done what he wanted them to do, or what indeed they wanted to do. He's getting them because they made it public. They made it public that in the past it's been dealable with, it's been manageable. But this is almost unmanageable. And so he had to make some kind of statement. I think it's a combination that made it unmanageable of he didn't know the certain cameras would be there. He didn't know that this was perhaps double tap and that they weren't going to stop after the first tap. They were going to go ahead and hit again, that there were going to be journalists and there were going to be obvious innocent civilians present at the time, and it was going to get filmed and there was going to be commentary on it that was almost immediate. Usually this stuff comes to us, through the health ministry or the UN or somebody else late. This came to us almost real time. So he had an extraordinarily hard time dealing with it. And when he did deal with it, he realized I've got to say something on the other side of the coin this time. I've got to say that maybe there was some fault here, and we'll look into it. Now, as I know with Rachel Corrie, that doesn't mean squat. They say they'll look into it, and they don't look into it. They just reinforce what they want to do all along, which is kill Palestinians. And if it's efficient and effective, that's good, not bad.
Donald Trump said that he didn't know about it. He was asked by the press if he knew about what's going on in Israel. Do you think that he's going to do something?
I don't know, Nima. I was in an interview this morning, a rather long interview about some of this. I was asked if I thought Trump knew. And frankly, I had to think about it a second or two before I answered, because if I said he knew about much of this, and we're talking Gaza here and a little bit West Bank, if I said he knew, I'd have to pronounce him Adolf Hitler Jr. I mean, I would. I'd have to say Bibi Netanyahu is Adolf Hitler reincarnated, and Trump is his disciple. I mean, that's the analogy they're always using, whether it's the Holocaust or whatever. They're always using it. Well, it works both ways. And I didn't want to say that about Donald Trump because I think he's fed garbage. I think he likes garbage almost as much as he likes McDonald's Big Macs. I think he is reluctant to receive the truth. When he does start to receive the truth, he stops it and changes the subject or moves somewhere else because he does have at least a partial conscience, and it's very difficult for him to deal with it. But something like this, just like I said with Bibi, it's the same with Trump. He can't deny this, and he can't get away with denying it because too many people saw it, and too many people were involved, and too many people were speaking, and too many people are angry, including Netanyahu, who may have gotten a call from Trump. I don't know. You have got to say something about this. Even if he didn't, he felt that way himself. So there's your indicators right there. But I come back to the basic question. Does Trump know what's going on around him other than what his sycophants tell him? That's true with any president to a degree. But here's what good presidents do. Good presidents whom I've been close to, personally close to, three of them, and closer to a fourth and a fifth through knowing Colin Powell, who was, after all, National Security Advisor to Ronald Reagan. So presidents, no matter whom they talk with, no matter who they have in their cabinet, no matter who they are in terms of experience, have to have some kind of network that they trust, have some confidence in, that is outside the established regime, whether it's academics at universities, scientists at laboratories, you name it. They have to have a network that they can double and triple check what they're being told by their cabinet. Now, this was less so with George H.W. Bush because the Gang of Eight, Jim Baker, Dick Cheney, Colin Powell, they were good. They were very good, and they trusted one another. And generally speaking, they didn't have to check up on one another. But since George H.W. Bush, every administration has had people operating on their own. And this administration and the one before it with Joe Biden had people operating almost exclusively on their own. Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken ran Joe Biden's administration, particularly in the last 2 years. So when that's going on, you had better have a rather exquisite outside network to have sanity checks with, to check your own brain power, to check your own reasoning, your own sanity. Trump has none of that except what? Fox News and other things like that. And he has billionaires with whom he can check who are going to tell him what he wants to hear because they're using him every hour of every day. They're using him. So this guy's surrounded by a moat that is almost impenetrable. To get into him, to actually get him to focus, to pay attention, and to get his attention, and even to get into the Oval Office or somewhere else where you can apprise him of the reality of things is almost impossible.
Larry, what we had Israel calling Lula, the president of Brazil, as persona non grata. They called it here in Brazilian media. I don't know if in the English media, I didn't find it, but in the Brazilian media, they're talking about that Israel is calling Lula a slave of Iran. I don't see anything Lula. There is no connection that much to go against Lula this way, because they're not happy with the position that Lula is taking against them with the case of Gaza and Palestine. But how long can they continue with this attitude, blaming each and everybody?
Nima, it's the same as the tranche of anti-Semitism. That's been used so many times now that even some of their own leadership here in the United States, particularly associated with the FDD and AIPAC, is saying, man, this is overused. We're going to lose this one day. And they're right. They're losing it right now. They're losing it all across America because people realize it isn't anti-Semitism. It's anti-Netanyahu. It's anti-genocide. It's anti what Israel is doing all over the Levant. That's what it is. It isn't anti-Semitism. There are even lots of American Jews who feel this way. So Iran is the next best target. Iran comes up, pops up. Lula is not, of course, in that camp, not any more than anyone else is. I mean, I'm sure he'd do business with Iran, as would any sane country, as long as it was on the up and up and legal. I'm sure some people would do it underneath, but it wouldn't be inimical. It would just be black economy. The world now is doing something like $10 trillion annually in the black economy, by the way, led by traffic in people, trafficking in illicit narcotics. And you ready for this one? Stolen automobiles, leading the world, $11 trillion. So that's the only reason they're doing it. And it's running out of steam. Just as anti-Semitism is running out of steam, charges of anti-Semitism that are absolutely invalid, and this business of being associated with Iran, that's the only targets of opportunity that they can think up. Now, if they had an angst, a bone to cut with Russia or whatever, they'd say Lula was in Russia's camp. Or if they had one to, pick with another country, they'd say he was in that camp. It's so hollow that it hurts to think about it. I mean, it really does. They've run out of ammunition. They've run out of propaganda ammunition. They've run out of vileness ammunition. They've run out of ammunition, period. I mean, they're in trouble. Israel is in existential straits right now. Deep, deep trouble. Israel is in as much trouble as a state entity as it has been in since 1948.
The breaking news, Larry, today is the France Ministry of Foreign Affairs has summoned the U.S. ambassador to Paris. And after American embassy accusing President Macron of not fighting anti-Semitism. And,
prompted by the Jewish members of the cabinet and the billionaires behind them. I don't even know if Trump authorized that. I would flip a coin to tell you whether he authorized that or not.
I would be curious to know to what extent Donald Trump is prepared to defend Netanyahu, because there is nothing there to be defended. What is he defending?
It's curious. We spent 30 minutes on that this morning in the interview, from every angle we could attack it from. And I kept coming back to my principal observation, and that is that Israel is our tool. We aren't theirs. We make it look like we're theirs, but Israel is our tool in the Levant. And right now, we're trying to complete what was a very, very unsuccessful, in fact, almost debilitating clean break strategy, which called on us to go on to Syria and on to Iran, at a minimum, to go on to Syria and on to Iran, after Iraq, I mean. As you know, we couldn't go on to Syria because we got bogged down in an insurgency in Iraq. Think about, just for a footnote, think about what Iran would be like if we put troops on the ground in Iran with regard to what Iraq was like. It'd be 10 times worse. And yet we are, I'm told, saying to the president from the military advice that we can handle Iran. And that means handling it on the ground, not just in the air. So that's how insane we are. You've got all that to look back on. You've got Iraq of what, 27 million? 27 million, desert territory that is highly conducive to air power. In fact, air power can sweep Iraq in a matter of hours. Iran is not that country. It's 4, 5, 6 times bigger. It's got 90 million people instead of 27 million. Relative homogeneity amongst those people, a few problems on the periphery, but those will consolidate too if we attack. And incredibly difficult terrain that almost killed Alexander the Great trying to maneuver in it. This is a whole different ballgame, and yet we're looking at it. We're looking at it seriously when Netanyahu starts the war, which he's going to do. And we have to follow. If Trump is an idiot, we have to follow. So all to say that this is insanity, as you've implied, but we seem to be a card-carrying member of the asylum.
Do these people understand? Do they remember what has happened in the Red Sea just 2 months ago?
Thank you for reminding me of that. And what does Israel do? It hits the government in Sana'a. They don't even work well with the Al-Ansar, the Houthis. Why in the world would they want to do that? Well, because they don't have anything else they can do that shows up on the television screen and shows fireballs and shows bombs and concrete and all kinds of disruption. That's all they know how to do. They're not touching Al-Ansar. They're not touching them unless somebody accidentally walks under a bomb. That's the only way they're getting back at them. And the Houthis are going like this to Israel.
It seems that the attack on Houthis in Yemen, it was some sort of decapitation attack. And
it's the same as with the attack on the airport. Are the Houthis using those airliners? You know, I mean, maybe they're going to Switzerland for their vacation. I don't know. You know, someone told me the other day when I made a glib comment like that, and I didn't think it was glib. I thought it was serious. They said, well, you know what they're using them for? They're importing arms with them. They're bringing in landmines and things. I said, I haven't seen any landmines or small arms used lately. What I've seen is missiles going at ships in the Red Sea and missiles going at Israel. Are they coming in on the airplanes? Well, they probably are. Does anybody really know that? Or are you listening to those lying sacks of proverbial horse crap called CIA, Mossad, and MI6? Do you actually know that? Do you know those airplanes are bringing in missiles? I think the Houthis have a pretty good supply. Thank you very much. Kind of like Iran.
I think these people are the same, those people who argued that they can trap Russia in Ukraine. They couldn't do it.
Yep.
And
same people.
Same even with the Israeli attack on Iran.
Yeah.
They wanted to do regime change overnight, and they couldn't achieve that. I don't know what's the logic behind this sort of. I don't know. Do you think that Donald Trump would be somehow? Can they convince him to go in that direction? It's
I think back to your where you started. I think Trump was told by the intelligence triumvirate, Mossad, MI6, and the CIA, led by Mossad probably, but MI6 was heavy in there. You have to look at the fingerprints on all of this. British fingerprints are all over it. The way the British live their imperial dreams these days is through the United States. So British fingerprints are over all this false intelligence and this half-truth intelligence. So what you're looking at here is a combination of lies and false intelligence coupled with a very resilient and active situation with regard to the Houthis, a resolute enemy, if you will. And with regard to your question about Iran, I think they convinced Trump, not that the bombs were going to do it. They convinced him that the bombs, in conjunction with the assassinations of a series of Iranian leaders, would bring the regime to its knees and that the people would rise up and overthrow it. They believe that, Nima. This isn't a lie that they're telling to Trump. They believe it. Netanyahu believed it. Netanyahu thought his remarks to the Iranian people about rise up now and overthrow this theocratic bunch of thugs was water off a duck's back. It just didn't work. They don't know what to do now except double down, triple down, because they don't know what to do. And they're going to really be surprised when they try to verify. They never have achieved it, Nima. I'm telling you, they have never achieved air supremacy over Iran. They've achieved the ability to toss missiles from borders into Iran, but they have never achieved the ability to fly over Iran unimpeded. They're going to try it this time, I think, and they're going to get shot down. And we're going to have a lot of Israeli pilots being paraded through the streets of Tehran. I mean, it's inevitable. And maybe some U.S. pilots too. So the Jesus is coming, you know, the come to Jesus meeting, the come to Jesus war is coming if we persist. And Netanyahu does not want to back off because he knows the moment he backs off, he's toast. He's gone.
Larry, the other dimension of what's going on with the Trump administration is here in the South America, close to Venezuela.
Yeah.
And the United States is somehow escalating the situation. I don't know. It's not just about Donald Trump. I remember Elon Musk, he was trying to do everything during the election. He said that he was somehow bribing people, bribing everybody that he could just to overthrow the government in Venezuela. Why are they so obsessed? It's all about the oil in Venezuela.
That's the principal reason. And Charles Koch, a very, very, very rich billionaire, is behind that, along with other oligarchs who are heavily invested in the kind of things that he does. The two refineries he has that refine only really heavy sulfur content crude, which comes principally from Venezuela, not just from Venezuela. There's a lot of it in Russia too. And Russia has the capacity to do it. But that's the principal reason. And then the secondary reason is, you ready for this one? The secondary reason is we have got to teach Venezuela a lesson. Where have we heard that before? Isn't that one of the major motivations of Bibi Netanyahu? I remember a lieutenant in the IDF telling me during Operation Cast Lead, when my commander, a lieutenant colonel in the IDF, battalion commander, told me that our purpose was to reestablish deterrence, and that meant we had to kill everything in sight, man, woman, child, baby, whatever. We had to give them no quarter. We had to do a Genghis Khan on them. We had to kill everything in sight, even the dogs and the cats. That's the way you reestablish deterrence. That's the way Netanyahu thinks. That's the way we think to a certain extent, particularly under the Monroe Doctrine in the Western Hemisphere. We think when someone slips out of that system we've built, you have to drag them back in with military force if necessary, kicking and screaming. Think Operation Just Cause, the largest no-knock drug bust in history against Panama in December 1990 or somewhere back there. That's what we do. And that was a composed president who I can tell you had to be talked into doing that operation because he'd been around when what? Vice President of the United States, 8 years for Ronald Reagan, handling most of the covert operations Ronald Reagan conducted, keeping them away from Reagan and keeping them in the vice president's office. Whom had he worked with? Manuel Noriega, big time, as a confidant, as a source, as a fellow fighter in the drug wars. And now he's got to take him down. This is the way the empire operates, Nima. That's the way we operate.
I don't know. Do they have any understanding on other countries in the South America, how they would react if something happens to Venezuela? Because I don't see Brazil just sitting and watching what's going on. They're going to react.
Well, it'd be a surprise to me, Nima. It really would. I have respect for Argentina, respect for Brazil, respect for Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, but I don't see them being the kind of state that would rise up for their fellow state. I just don't. And there's reasons I don't see that. We have worked with all of their militaries to the extent that I would say many of their militaries, and this is not a comfortable fact for their civilian leaders, are in a tight relationship with U.S. Southern Command as they are with their own government, maybe even their own Department of Defense, whatever it might be called. We saw this throughout the machinations with Chile and Allende. We saw it throughout the similar ones with the Falklands War and our taking both sides, Britain and Argentina. You know, we did that, right? Just like in the Iran-Iraq War, we took both sides. We didn't want to lose either one of them, we said. That was the positive spin. The negative spin was we were going to back both of them, so if one of them won, we could be behind that one. And that included Argentina. That included Argentina as much as it did Britain. Britain doesn't like to hear that, but I'm sorry. That was the way it was. Maggie Thatcher was not too happy when I think she kind of figured that out toward the end. All to say, I just don't think the answer to your question is other countries would help. They should. They should, because right now they're up against a paper tiger. And if there is a time to throw off the yoke of the Monroe Doctrine, of the United States of America, of the debilitating way that we have treated Latin America for 100 years with a couple of intermissions, it's the time now. It's the time now. To wait until the empire is collapsing and falling apart is conducive to calling your own suicide into question, because the empires that falls apart, as Ricardo Alarcón said to me, will thrash a lot of grass. And if it's falling apart in a way that it needs to demonstrate its residual power is still there, it'll go after small targets. It'll go after, that's what we're doing with Venezuela right now to a certain extent. Although I think the major motivation is the oil. It's a dangerous time. If you're going to stand up for a friend, you're going to stand up for a fellow state. Imagine Colombia standing up for Venezuela. Colombia has as many problems with Venezuela and Venezuela with it as it does with El Gringos, Los Gringos in the north. So that's hard for me to envision. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see some kind of solidarity amongst, especially that northern rim of South America, which I would include Brazil in. But I don't know. You're asking me to say what I can't believe in my heart.
Yeah. Larry, you mentioned Britain being all over the map, and the United Kingdom is somehow trying to influence in each and every region that they can influence. Here is what we've heard from Armenian Foreign Minister, that Armenia and Britain have agreed to elevate their relations to the level of a strategic partnership. Today I talked with Marhandi. He said that Iran clearly sent a message to Armenia. You have to be careful with what you're doing there.
Yeah.
If not, he said Iran even may consider to capture the southern part of Armenia if they try to block Iran in that region.
Right.
It seems the situation is somehow. How do you see the role of the British in the way that they're? Why? What do they need from Armenia?
I
From a
told you that
strategic.
I told you the story about the tailor of Panama, didn't I? John le Carré's book. That's what Britain does now. Britain lives off the vestiges of its empire that it sees in the mirror of Washington. That's the only way Britain can live. The only way its House of Lords, not all of them, but many of them, the only way its leadership and those who are behind that leadership, just like they are in Washington, it's the only way they can continue to make themselves feel good about Britain and the empire that was. They live vicariously through the United States. That's why they're doing things like this. Blessed by the triumvirate, CIA and Mossad. Imagine how scared Russia is of Britain being allied with a country in the Caucasus. If I were Putin, I would say to London, keep on going, and I'm going to make you disappear. I promise you, I will make you disappear. I mean, it's absurd, but they're doing it because of the shadow of the empire. They would never do this. If America didn't exist, they would never do this, nor would any European power do anything like this. They'd be far more circumspect, which is why Trump's instincts about standing down U.S. participation in NATO and ultimately standing down NATO, which it would have to do, are smart, are wise. Make these people live their own lives with their own money and their own power, period. Don't let them live in your shadow. Britain, more than any other European power, and I hesitate to say that because they aren't really a European power in my mind. They're a little island out there making messes out of everything. Britain is still living its imperial dreams through the United States. It needs to stop. And it needs to extend to the continent. It's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. One, because they are pipsqueaks and they're acting like they're 10 feet tall. This agreement is similar, is evidence of that. Two, we aren't going to be there in a crunch. And three, if we were there in a crunch, Nima, we might get defeated ourselves. This is a different world. It's a very different world, and it's coming on like a tornado.
Did you watch the video? Came out yesterday. Shows that how the British are are gathering information from Gaza and providing Israel with information in real time. And
They were
the other
flying.
hand,
They were flying their planes out of Cyprus and running intel flights all over Israel and downloading it to Israel, to the IDF, so they could better target, better kill, better murder, better slaughter.
you have to. I don't know how can you come out and condemn Israel after doing this. Did,
Good question. Good comment. Yeah. You speak with two voices, we think, London. You speak here and do this. It's like Bernie Sanders hinted at the other day. We have people in the Senate and people in the House now who are questioning some of the things that are going on over there, but they're still signing the checks. And we got Erdogan, pontificating all over the place and still sending the oil, still trading with Israel. They speak a great, great story for their publics, but they act completely differently underneath the table.
Larry, there was an article in Politico, and in this article, it's talking about the next 5 years, and they believe that we're going to have new escalation between Russia and NATO in the Baltics, India and Pakistan, considering the use of nuclear weapons, and
no,
China and
Trump put that one to shame for the Nobel Peace Prize.
and China and Taiwan, India and China, and North Korea and South Korea. Looking at all of these conflicts that they're trying to picture for us for the next 5 years, we can somehow get what would be the agenda. I don't know what can they do to bring the conflict. I can understand Russia and NATO in the Baltics, but how about China and India? What can they do to make a new conflict between these two giants?
Well, they're putting all that out to make people think about what is not realistic, so they won't think about what is very realistic. As you just said, the regional conflicts that are being stoked by the empire right now, all along that arc of crisis I keep talking about, from the Arctic all the way down to the Levant and into Iran and the northern Indian Ocean, are all being put up in order to try and arrest this inexorable shift of power towards China. That's where the conflagration is going to start, and that's where it's going to end, and it's going to end with nuclear weapons. I remember vividly, I think I mentioned this to you, one of the Germans, I think it was even Helmut Kohl at one time who said it, but it was one of their generals at another time, when we were briefing the Fulda Gap, and the group of Soviet forces, Germany, 10 strike divisions led by that time by Marshal Gorkov, I think I remember, who was a brilliant armored, he was the Patton of the Soviet Union at that time, the George Patton type guy. He was going to break through the Fulda Gap and we were going to nuke him. That was our war plan. And the Germans were these generals, and I think Kohl actually said something about it one time too. I go back to look at my notes. That's my country. That's my land. You're going to use those nuclear weapons on. Right. Bingo. That was the U.S. plan. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about a conflagration in Europe, which would call on us to exercise our nuclear power, and we would do it on their territory. So they're fools if they think they want to call that on, but they are working towards calling that on. And Putin has already shown that he's not a man to bluff. He's not a man that uses bluff as a major portion of his portfolio, unlike Donald Trump and a lot of people in the West. He's serious. He's deadly serious. And if he ever reaches the point where his decision calculus puts a potential war with NATO, which he knows will go nuclear, at the 60 to 65% probability area, he may preempt. I mean, he said he won't. He said he'll only do it in defense of the CSTO and, of Russia. But a smart man would preempt and hope that that would be enough to halt the progress towards full use of them. We're talking about danger there in a big sense. All along that arc, we're talking about danger. Venezuela's not in that arc. Brazil's not in that arc. None of these countries where Trump is trying to stir up action to get the attention off the Epstein case. Thank you very much. None of these is in that arc. Therefore, none of these is what I would call existential for the empire. That one is. That one is. And we're rapidly losing those who could help us either stabilize that arc or, in the event we actually bring on conflict, be neutral at worst and on our side at best, like India. Nima, we expended tremendous energy in diplomatic efforts for 20 years trying to win India over to our side, away from the Soviet Union / Russia and over to our side. We felt like at the time we already had Pakistan, but we were sharing Pakistan with Beijing. No question about that. And the Pakistanis knew that. They played us off against one another. That was all right as long as it wasn't serious. India was our target. India became very much a full-time, almost partner, especially their Navy, and took a lot of burden off of us in the Northern Indian Ocean because their Navy's fairly good and fairly large. And their Navy really liked working with the U.S. fleet. They thought we were the most competent sailors on the ocean, and they enjoyed working with us. Delhi was not quite so close and comfortable with it, but nonetheless, we had a good relationship. We've ruined all of that, Nima. 20 years of painstaking diplomacy. We've ruined that. We've ruined it so badly that India looks like it's making up with China. It's stunning. It's stunning how stupid we are, Nima. How unwise we are. Stupid and unwise.
Actually, Modi, he just ignored the pressure coming from the United States, and
Yep.
we're not gonna we're gonna continue buying Russian oil.
We've done something else that I thought was impossible. We've made Modi think about other things so that he's not quite so oppressive as he was against his own Muslims. Unquestionably, we've been a positive force in that regard, but that's a negative, having to do that, having to sacrifice your own interest in order to get his attention elsewhere. But his principal attention, I think, right now is on us and what we're doing, and China and how to counter what we're doing, and Russia. But India's always been friendly with Russia. Indian military, other than the Navy, we couldn't wean the Air Force or the Army away from Russia. We weaned the Navy a little bit because of the interoperability and the practice together in the Indian Ocean, but we couldn't get the other two services. So we never were totally successful with that. But now we've ruined everything.
Donald Trump said that, in his opinion, the Ministry of Defense should be the Ministry of War. And what
be more appropriate for the last 20 years.
Yeah. Putting that, taking that into consideration and looking at what he said about denuclearization, here is what he said.
To do with Russia and with China is denuclearization. And it's very important. One of the things I discussed with President Putin the other day, it wasn't just that, it was also other things. And I think the denuclearization is it's a big aim, but Russia's willing to do it, and I think China's going to be willing to do it too. We can't let nuclear weapons proliferate. We have to stop nuclear weapons. The power is too great.
Best remarks I've heard out of him in a long time, but of course I know he's insincere as hell. He is totally insincere. He's just saying that because that is the moment du jour, the time to say it.
Because to consider what was happening, that he told us this sort of idea, he was meeting with the South Korean president. Right.
Yeah,
I think a main goal is North Korea, and do you think that's the case? Or
he went on to talk about how he was going to continue with Kim Jong-un, and it was going to be successful this time. That he had a little problem with some people in the past, like John Bolton. Thank you very much. I was so surprised he didn't say his name. I mean, what a time to throw one at John Bolton. He's had his house searched by the FBI. Why not throw a big rock at him too? Like, you screwed up my relationship with Kim Jong-un, you neoconservative ass. I mean, that's what Trump would have liked to have said, I think. He didn't, and that's unlike Donald Trump, is to hold those kind of barbs back. But after all, he was in front of the cameras and with the South Korean president, whom he now likes because he wants to make up with Kim Jong-un too. I mean, he explicitly said that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay. Let's get back on a peace treaty with Kim Jong-un. It would be very easy to accomplish if we would back off the incredible thing we've done with Korea, because we're not on Korea today to defend Korea. We're on Korea today to be forward positioned to fight China. And the Koreans sense that viscerally, if not intellectually. I think some of them sense it intellectually. And they're not too happy with their peninsula being used as a launch pad for a war against China, with whom they do most of their commerce. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, Nima. It's crazy. What we're doing is crazy, not just way, but also in Northeast Asia.
None of these countries can go against China. Korea, South Korea, together with Japan.
They don't have to either, because they have good commercial relationships. They have good trade. They have not totally balanced trade, but that's just the nature of the beast. Some people are going to sell more and some people are going to buy more and so forth. And you work those things and you massage them and you keep them within a equitable amount of trade dynamic. We don't seem to think that's impossible with China. We think China's going to rip everybody a new rear end. They are ripping everybody a new rear end, but they're doing it principally because we're motivating them to. We're motivating them to do that. We're motivating them to do things like take the 60% of rare earth metals, which they have, the 90% of those metals that are refined to the point of use, and not give them to anybody that needs them that's inimical to China's interests. Read the Empire. And we're gonna discover just how disastrous these tariffs are. Not so much, although we're going to do it there too, but not so much in the impact it's going to have on the American consumer. It will, and that'll be politically dynamite. But it's also going to is having major impact on the ability of the Pentagon to field forces and to supply them, because China has so much. You talk about EV batteries, you talk about charging stations I think I read the other day that China has 1 million or something like that or more charging stations all across the country. We have 1/60th of that. They're just so far ahead in so many categories that are important. And look what's happening. China is ripping our rear end off in terms of renewables. I mean, they are just going bangers. Oh. And look what Donald Trump just did. He pretty much murdered the ability of the United States to progress further in wind and solar, because he doesn't like, and he said this, I don't like those fields out there full of those black panels instead of beautiful trees and birds. And I don't like those towers because those towers kill birds. Donald, when was the last time you became an ornithologist? I mean, come on, man. We need renewables in a certain percentage to replace fossil fuels, or we're all toast. Do you not get that? No, he doesn't. He doesn't. In his heart of hearts, I don't think this is a fabrication. I don't think this is something forced on him by the billionaires. It could be in part because they want the fossil fuels to continue, many of them, like the people behind Peter Thiel, for example, and Charles Koch Charles Koch would bring back coal if he could, because he was one of the biggest, richest coal magnates in America. They don't want renewables replacing fossil fuels. But I think Trump has this crazy idea in his head that fossil fuels are good, that they're good for the environment. They're not bad. It's all a hoax. I think he believes that. I do. I think he believes that. This is probably the most unconscionable, debilitating, and wrong concept he holds in that head of his.
Yeah.
He's been sold a bill of goods by many of his advisors, I'm sure. And I'll tell you who a lot of these advisors are now. If you want to read a book that'll tell you about this, it's called Dark Crusade. And it's about the dispensationalists in America, who now constitute somewhere between 60 and 75 million of our citizens. Another term for them is fundamentalists. And these people are allied with Israel to bring about Armageddon, the rapture, because they think they and their philosophy goes this way. Think about South America and that guy who took the people down there and got, 900 of them killed. Their philosophy is that they will be raptured up into the heavens with Jesus when the end comes. And they're trying their best to bring about the end. This is a huge Great Awakening event in America that most people are utterly ignorant of. Maybe because so many Americans are part of it.
I think what's missing in the picture, in the mind of those people who are deciding about what would be the strategy of the United States, is that somehow it's not understandable for them that what Russia is doing in Ukraine is existential for Russia and Russian security.
Yep.
What Palestinians, Gazan, are doing is existential.
And Netanyahu would say it's existential for him too, because he means it's existential for greater Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, maybe parts of Sudan, Egypt. It ends the dream. It ends the dream. Oh, I have to kill all the Palestinians. And then I have to kill a few Arabs too, other than Palestinian Arabs. Maybe some Egyptians can't make up their mind whether they're Arabs or not. Technically speaking, I don't think the Egyptians, looking at history, I don't think the Egyptians are Arabs. I think the genealogical record, the DNA record would differ with that. I don't think they're Arabs in Egypt, but I think the bulk of the Egyptian people aren't Arabs. And we make a mistake in calling them Arabs, but they want a little bit of that too. So Israel's ready to kill a lot of people.
The point that I'm trying to make, Larry, is that all these wars that the United States has been doing, it's not any of them, none of them was existential for the United States. They don't need to go to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to Libya. Right now with Venezuela, if they go to Iran.
Lindsey Graham thinks they are, Nima. And why does he think that? OIL. He thinks that we have to have our hands on all the oil we can possibly get our hands on. We thought we were going to get our hands on. Remember that book I told you about that has a little photo in there of the Caspian Sea and the U.S. paratroopers landing outside Baku? And I said, boy, isn't that a prophetic photograph? Because those are the first Imperial stormtroopers to land in Central Asia. Because under the Caspian Sea is enough fossil fuel, methane and regular crude, for all of the entire Central Asian complex, all the stands into Xinjiang province, 100 years of fossil fuel under the Caspian Sea. If you can get to it, if you can retrieve it, and if you can get it out and put it on the market. Now, those are big challenges, but nonetheless, it's there. We were after that, Nima, big time. I was there when we were planning it. Now I think we've given up on that. That means we have got to find other sources, Venezuela, other places that might have oil.
Yeah. I don't know
by
the
way, you know where the rest of it is? I mean, really just incredible amounts in the country of 11 time zones. Russia hasn't even come close to tapping the various sources of fossil fuels that they have. So I mean, when Trump stands up there and says, we're the biggest oil producer in the world. Yeah, we're fracking the bejesus out of our country in order to do that. It's a very untenable situation economically and geologically, but we're doing it. And we can't keep doing that forever. On the other hand, in Central Asia and in Russia are enough assets to last for another century and a half. Now, I hope they don't. Not unless we discover some marvelous technology that cleans up emissions almost 99%, because that would set it off. I mean, we'd be done. We'd be toast with regard to the climate if we burned all those assets. I'm just saying what the differential is right now. Trump is a fool to think that the United States is going to remain the number one oil power in the world. It's a farcical dream that we would do so.
I don't know if you saw the interview that Lutnick had on MSNBC, on NBC News. Here is what he said about Lockheed Martin. He says that the company makes 97% of their revenue from the U.S. government.
I would have thought it was 100.
Yeah, here is what he said, Larry.
Defense companies, though, Secretary, why shouldn't the U.S. government say, you know what, we use Palantir services, we would like a piece of Palantir. We use Boeing services, we would like a piece of Boeing. There are a lot of businesses that do business with the U.S. government that benefit by doing business with the U.S. government. I guess the question is, where's the line?
Oh, there's a monstrous discussion about defense. I mean, Lockheed Martin makes 97% of their revenue from the U.S. government. They are basically an arm of the U.S. government. They make exquisite munitions. I mean, amazing things that can knock a missile out of the air when it's coming towards you. But what's the economics of that? I'm going to leave that to my Secretary of Defense and the Deputy Secretary of Defense. These guys are on it and they're thinking about it. But I tell you what, there's a lot of talking that needs to be had about how do we finance our munitions acquisitions. I think a lot of that is talking. And now you have the right people in the jobs and Donald Trump at the head thinking about what is the right way to do it. I tell you, the way it has been done has been a giveaway.
Yeah,
I agree with that. And there was a major movement at different junctures in our history since World War II when we first created this huge complex. And that is to nationalize it. And there are good arguments for nationalizing it. But I would not nationalize it under the current administration and its cabinet because they couldn't handle it. But if you had decent oversight, if you had a good Congress with good oversight committees, if you had a good investigative committee like Harry Truman had in World War II, if you had all these things going, you could nationalize the defense industry and you would really be going back to the past. Because America never had until World War II a huge complex of privatized defense industry. It's shipbuilding. All those things were done by the government, sometimes through contractors, but more or less overseen by, checked by the government. Only World War II brought the private enterprise in big time. And FDR's dollar men, as it were, you know, all these big CEOs that said they'd work for $1 a year. They knew that working for $1 a year was a pipe dream because they were making tons of money off the military industrial complex as it grew up, which is why Truman had his investigative committee. And he found, I think Truman said something like, war profiteering is not going to happen on my watch. Well, it continued to happen, of course, but he curbed a lot of it. So nationalizing the defense industry is a cogent move if you have a competent government. But if you don't have a competent government, look at these guys. These guys in this government own shares in Palantir and Anduril. They own shares in Lockheed Martin. And many of them did not divest. Trump didn't force them to do that. They're breaking the law, actually, but they're still doing it. And we want this group to take over this multi-billion dollar, multi-trillion dollar industry? I think not, probably. but I'm sure they're ready to do it if it comes up. Can you imagine Pete Hegseth, who couldn't run a dime store properly, running Lockheed Martin?
Here is, I think we can now understand why Donald Trump is so much insisting on sending weapons to Ukraine. Here is what he said.
By the way, that's an insult to dime stores.
What?
That's an insult I just made to dime stores. I'm sorry.
They didn't pay the 2 and they paid the 5. So, and as you know, we are selling a tremendous amount of equipment to NATO. We're not spending any money. We're making money, but I don't want to talk about making. I want to talk about we're no longer involved with funding Ukraine, but we are involved with trying to stop the war and the killing in Ukraine. So we're selling missiles and military equipment, millions and millions, and ultimately billions of dollars to the NATO people, where I'm very friendly and we have a great relationship, but that was an amazing trip. So they're funding the entire war. We're not funding anything. I think it's an important point to make because a lot of people don't understand that.
That's the first time I've ever seen him in a dark tie like that. He must have been to a funeral. It's usually bright yellow, bright orange.
Yeah. Larry, do you think that nationalizing the arm and weapon production in the United States would somehow influence these policies all around the world?
He had 3 choices, 3 basic choices. One was continue as past, continue Biden's policy, Trump's policy. After all, it was Trump's war before it was Biden's. It was a little more subdued war, but it was still Trump's war. That was the first choice, was to continue. Second choice is to cut and run. I mean, almost completely cut and run. Leave your nuclear umbrella, denounce NATO, leave, and let the Europeans have the whole thing. The third choice was to look like you were doing a little bit of the second choice, but to linger and make money. Trump apparently picked that one, but it's a bad choice in many respects because, one, we can't build the equipment fast enough to make any real money. And 2, Ukraine is defeated, badly defeated. Right now, you have sections of the front lines, as it were, that aren't even manned. The Russians can pick and choose as they will, and they will be very careful about it because they're still wary of being trapped by, a feint, a sudden opening in the line that they pour through and then they get hit in the flanks. But they have new strategies they've developed to protect those flanks that are focused on drone technology and satellites and so forth. It's really very sophisticated what the Russians are doing now. So the only reason they haven't crossed the river and moved aggressively on Kyiv, for example, and consolidated their victory all up and down the line is because they're being careful and they want to continue this business of killing 10 Ukrainians for every 1 Russian and even make it higher in terms of differential. So it really, none of those choices that I said Trump had really make much sense now. The best choice he could have made, and I know he couldn't do this, but he could at least start the process and move it along at a pace that maybe comports with reality, if you will. The best thing he could have done was what he started to do, what J.D. Vance started to do, what Marco Rubio, as inexpertly as it was done by him, started to do. And that's tell the Europeans we're leaving. The nuclear shield will stay over them, up for them. They can call on it as necessary. We're not going to shoot for them unless we determine that it is necessary. If there's an existential threat to Western Europe, it's a given that we would use our nuclear weapons if we had to, God forbid. And let them go and let them do whatever they want to do, which is to fall into chaos, probably. Realize that their young people will not be drafted. Realize that they have an even bigger problem in that regard than we do. Realize they couldn't possibly build a military machine that could stand up to Russia. And what do you do when you come to that realization? You take out your diplomatic instrument and what remains of your financial and economic instrument, and you say to Moscow, let's talk. Let's talk and let's come to some kind of reconciliation. We recognize your previous problem. We were a large part of it. Mea culpa. Let's set up a new architecture where we can all survive economically, financially, and militarily. And let's call it the new security architecture for Europe. And let's then consult the United States with what we've produced and talk to China and India too. Let's do some really smart things for a change. That's what Europe should do. That's what we should do to compel them to do it, but we won't. He's mucked it all up. He's got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to get a little pregnant, but I'm not going to get pregnant. You know, he just has no decisiveness about him.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today.
Are we done already? Geez, I've talked for 3 hours straight. This guy this morning showed me his one of his current ones. Man, it was really good. It's on the warfare state, and it was as good as Al Jazeera. Have you seen Al Jazeera's the first two parts?
Yeah,
they're pretty good. This one was good too. I mean, it's a very good. We need more of this. We need some people telling the truth.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, we need, but yeah, it's always.
Lula should go into the movie business.
Yeah, he's.
You see, we're getting ready to produce another movie by that producer who made O Dark 30, which was one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Actually extolling the virtues of torture. I mean, that was a terrible movie. Just a terrible movie. It was hard for me to watch it. You could, if my wife were still alive, you could ask her. It was hard to watch that movie because I knew there were so many lies in it and so much cheating, and they were giving the impression that torture worked. They were giving the impression that torture worked. Now she's going to make a new movie. I can't wait to see this one. This is all Hollywood trying to make money, you know, New York, Hollywood, whoever. And they'll make it off anything, no matter how unconscionable the subject. They should be making one off of nuclear weapons and what they'll do to us. You know, another one like Dr. Strangelove, you know, or How I Quit Worrying and Learned to Love the Bomb. I think that was the subtitle. How I Quit Worrying and Learned to Love the Bomb. You know, what a title. You know how many Americans alive today have seen that movie? I've done a little informal poll. 0. They don't even know it was ever made. How many Americans have dug a bomb shelter in their backyard? 0. Now, someone watching this will send me an email and say, I got one in my backyard. And I'll say, good for you, dude. You might need to use it. Anyway.
Thank you, Larry. Great pleasure, as always.
Take care.
And see you on Friday.
On Friday. Yeah, I got my Aloha shirt. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.